Good evening, everyone. My name's Thomas DeAngelis, and I'm the Research Associate Strategic Projects at the Create Centre at the University of Sydney, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I'd just like to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm zooming in from, and acknowledge that this land was never ceded, and that Aboriginal people have been telling stories and singing songs and working creatively for over 60,000 years, and it's our great privilege to be able to do the same. For those of you that don't or aren't familiar with the Create Centre, we're a research centre that conducts research on the impact of engaging with the arts on education, health and wellbeing. And we also focus on integrating the arts into all areas of life, from early childhood all the way through to adulthood. We promote the arts as a fundamental component of a holistic education and a healthy society. Tonight's webinar is being presented by Amelia Cobb, who is a passionate educator, facilitator and lifelong learner. And Amelia is currently a lead teacher at Montessori East Primary School. Amelia's presentation at our recent Leading Creative Schools conference, which took place in March earlier this year, was one of the standout presentations that we enjoyed during that conference. You're going to see a kind of virtual version of that presentation this evening, and probably a little bit extra. But if you had been there live, as I had been earlier this year, we actually got to experiment with some of the recycled swatches of fabric and make miniature versions of our own high fashion during Amelia's presentation. And so it was a highlight for me. It was tactile, interactive, and I found myself convinced that it would be something and a lesson and some teaching content that young people would have really thoroughly enjoyed. So it's great that Amelia is able to share that with this audience tonight. So without much further ado, I'd like to hand over to Amelia and thank her for joining us, and enjoy tonight's webinar, everyone.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I'm so sorry that we can't be making things with our hands this evening. Instead, I'll just be sharing images and exploring with you tonight this concept of child-led learning through the case study of a child-led sustainable fashion show. So I'd just like to begin by thanking and acknowledging Thomas and Anna for facilitating this webinar this evening, and also Michael and Robin for your inspiring commitment to the arts and to education, as evident in the Create Centre and in many of the other amazing projects you are invested in. It's a real honour for me to be presenting with you at the Create Centre this evening. Like Thomas, I'm joining from Gadigal land, but from Gadigal, Birrabirragal and Bidjigal land on the east coast this evening, and I pay my respects to the elders from these lands, past and present. I extend that respect to any First Nations people who may be joining us this evening, or who choose to watch this recording at a later date. I myself grew up on Gadigal land, so the sounds of particular birds or the smells of particular blossoms and the sparkling sea really feel like home to me. And yet I am a visitor on this land that was stolen from the Gadigal people and remains unceded. Tonight, I honour their ongoing connection to culture, community, to the land and the waterways that surround us. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. So this evening, I'm going to be sharing a child-led sustainable fashion show with you through a number of different frameworks to develop a comprehensive picture of the project and to help us understand some of the strengths of this particular case study. To begin, I'll look at the concept of joy and the relevance of joy in education today. I'll also then look at Montessori, and the Montessori as an alternative method of education in which this project took place. In particular, I'll look at the ways this pedagogy positions the teacher and the student as crucially distinct from other educational methods. We'll then look at the core pillars of creativity, sustainability, and community that underpinned this project. And finally, I'll examine the design process, including the learning methods and the outcomes, and the beautiful student garments we'll get to share and have a look at today. tonight. To begin, I wanted to open with this concept of joy, because at the heart of this project really was joy. It was a joyful project to be part of for the students, for their parents, for the teachers, and really for the wider school community. It was a project that was so exciting to be part of for all involved, and it made me really think about the role of joy in education and whether or not joy is a priority in our schools. Joy is not something that I hear about often in any educational space that I'm part of. On the contrary, what I hear about most are concerns for students' mental health and well-being. And in the same breath, I hear about this ever-mounting pressure on their academic performance. However, in my experience, joy should be, can be, and is an integral part of learning. The type of joy that I witnessed in this project wasn't just like a fleeting feeling. It was a deep and complex emotion that led to a really strong sense of engagement between the students and their learning, between a strong sense of connection between the students and the wider school community. Prioritizing joy led to an engaging learning environment that not only supported children academically, but also emotionally and socially. So alongside the emphasis on joy was the Montessori learning environment in which this project took place. So I preface this in the Leading Creative Schools conference too. My role here, I'm really not here to preach about Montessori this evening. I have my hesitations about some aspects of this learning method, but I'm here to provide like the crucial tenets that I think underpinned or had a huge influence on this project. So in a Montessori setting, the concept of education and the roles of the student and the teacher are fundamentally different from other educational approaches, which I'll get into in a moment. But for those of you who don't know, Maria Montessori, you can see her here with a group of children. She, the founder of this educational approach, she began her career as a doctor. She's Italian in Italy. She was, I think, one of the first female doctors in Italy. And she used the scientific method from, I guess, her medical training to develop an approach to education. So her approach was grounded in observation of the child, what worked and what didn't work in the learning environment, and experimentation with different methods until she finessed her approach, which became prevalent in the early 20th century. She had her first classroom open in Rome in 1907. Montessori saw education as not really to do with the transmission of knowledge from teacher to student, but rather it was an aid to life. So she believed that education should support the intrinsic powers within each child, helping them to grow to become independent, capable, and confident individuals. Within this vision, the role of the teacher and the student is very different. The child is not seen as a blank canvas, but rather a person who has inherent powers within them, capable of educating themselves with the right guidance and support. In order for that to happen, Montessori believed there has to be two crucial things available to the child. The first was a prepared environment, the learning environment, and the second was the prepared adult. So the prepared environment is a huge and complex thing I won't get into much here, but I'll just say that it is one in which the child is able to direct their own learning. They're inspired by different pieces of material, predominantly, that they use with their hands. And each piece of material caters to the distinct developmental needs of the child at that time. The prepared adult or teacher in this context acts as a guide or facilitator to the child's learning. They're not center stage in the classroom imparting knowledge, but rather they could be lost within like a workshop style learning environment, acting as a guide or facilitator to the child's learning, there to support them, to inspire them, and to nurture them. So Montessori, in Montessori's words, the art of education must become a service to the powers inherent in all children. It must be a help to life. To aid life, leaving it free, however, to unfold itself, that is the basic task of the educator. The greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as if I did not exist. It's a very different position of the teacher, which I think is really interesting. And the secret of good teaching is to regard the child's intelligence as a fertile field in which seeds may be sown to grow under the heat of flaming imagination. So interestingly, whilst over 100 years old, there are some aspects of this vision of education that remain relevant even today. Current leaders in education continue to emphasize the importance of self-directed learning, child-led learning, and this concept of education as an aid to life. So I have just two people here I wanted to share tonight that you may know. So Richard Elmore says that schooling is just one of many environments in which humans develop the ability to exercise judgment and control over what they learn, how they learn, and what they intend to do with what they learn. And Daniel Harris says that innovative pedagogies that prioritize student agency and engagement empower learners to take control of their educational experiences, making learning a more active and meaningful process. So I just wanted to start with that, drawing some links there between this very, over 100-year-old pedagogy and with some of the educational perspectives and research that's around now. I think that it's really interesting to see that Montessori was pretty innovative for her time. And I guess more broadly, just to think of the benefit for us as educators, but also just all people in turning to the past and building upon the wisdom of pioneers in education and other fields. So I just touched previously on a few aspects of the Montessori approach, and I wanted to talk to a few more that I feel underpinned this project. So the first is this notion of teacher-child relationships. So in a Montessori classroom, the teacher has the same children for 3 years at a time. There's also less of a hierarchy between teacher and child. They call us by our first names, and there's less of a power dynamic generally. So this creates a culture of belonging and trust in which children feel more comfortable to be themselves, ideally, hopefully, and to take risks. And I feel that that context was helpful and evident in the fashion show through the ways in which the children felt comfortable in experimenting with self-expression and felt confident in exploring different aspects of their identity and personality and selves. The notion of freedom within limits is the second one I'll speak to. That's a key tenet of the Montessori pedagogy. Montessori believed that in order to develop the child's independence, it was crucial to give them age-appropriate freedoms within boundaries or limits. The children are thus accustomed to being afforded certain freedoms and know how to ideally and have developed a sense of independence from a pretty young age. And I think that was also a key context in which this fashion show took place, as I witnessed children taking charge of their own learning when they were given and afforded certain levels of responsibility and independence. So we can see their kinesthetic learning. I touched on this earlier, but Montessori believed that we learn through our hands and through doing. So the children that took part in this fashion show have had many years of experience learning through tactile exploration, learning through making, and learning through doing. And yeah, this notion of independence and child-led learning is a central tenet to Montessori. And I think that context set the children extremely well up in this fashion show, as they were able to guide their own learning when they were given and afforded the opportunity to direct their own learning. They were comfortable and confident in doing that. And lastly, collaboration. So the Montessori learning environment is collaborative, really all throughout, especially in the primary years 1 to 6. The children are constantly working together in different formations. She believed that the classroom was like a mini society where children test and explore different relationships. So the children are very used to working together, and working as a member of a team was of central significance to this project. This is just a little fancy diagram I made to show that we've spoken about the Montessori context, which underpinned the fashion show. And then, I don't know, I like to think of it like a triangle. There are three other core pillars, each of equal significance, that I think were of key significance to this project. So the first was creativity, that I'll talk to. So in this context, in the fashion show, the context of the fashion show, creativity meant giving children the opportunity to generate new ideas, to generate solutions to a key kind of problem, and to innovate. So the children had this task or opportunity to design their own sustainable garments, and they were given complete freedom as to how they did so. They had the chance to take risks and to learn from their mistakes. Through the process of making their own garments and telling their stories through their garments, they had the opportunity to self-express and to experiment with different parts of their identity. And yeah, they had this opportunity to innovate, imagining and inventing new solutions in the form of a unique garment. The next pillar of the show was community. For me, teaching really evokes and invites community, but it's something I feel that we're losing touch with in many schools and learning environments. I think the focus on academic achievement and output overshadows the importance of generating and building community connections. So one of the kind of aims of this project was to restore community, was to restore the connections that we already have, and to make new ties within the school community and beyond. I think that creating this sense of community enabled the children to see the benefit of being part of a whole beyond their just tiny little classroom. It gave them a sense also of social responsibility and a belonging to a wider group. The last pillar that I'll talk about is sustainability. So sustainability was like the lens through which this project was framed. The children were given an opportunity, a challenge, provoked to design their own and create their own garments using only recycled materials, and also to put on their own fashion show using only recycled, sustainable materials. So by interweaving sustainability and creativity, we introduce the children to the significant role they can play in addressing global issues. They gained an understanding of one of the factors contributing to climate change and experience being part of a solution. I feel that this approach heightened their awareness and instilled a sense of responsibility and empowerment in the children. Okay, so I'd now like to share or think about this project in terms of the design process that we followed, which I've just listed here. I didn't invent this design process. It's, I drew on many other artists, creators, educators to help me scaffold this. But just broadly, we began by inspiring the children and positioning this project within the context of global warming and climate change. We then looked at skill building, so helping the children develop the skills to create their own garments. We then had a phase of experimentation, play, and innovation as the children began to make their own garments. And then we had a phase of feedback and improving where needed. And lastly, this phase of sharing. But before I do, you can see here, or maybe you can't, it's very tiny, but there's someone in front of the screen presenting to the group. So that is Megan Hanson, who was a key collaborator on this project. So Megan is a textile artist and textile technician at COFA, UNSW, and also a friend of mine. And she worked with me on this project and was played a really vital role, and is sorry not to be here this evening. So we were very lucky to have that partnership with Megan in inspiring the children and in guiding them in sustainable garment making techniques, as that's her area of speciality. To begin, Megan ran workshops to draw the children's awareness, I guess, to the value of each item of their clothing. So we see here, one pair of jeans uses a kilogram of cotton, which requires 7,500 to 10,000 litres of water to produce. And that's about 10 years worth of drinking water for one person. The children were really blown away by facts like these, as I don't think they've ever really considered the amount of resources that go into creating the clothing that they wear. They learnt that the fashion industry contributes crucially to climate change, is one of the contributors, which was like the framing of this project. We then posed them with a question. Can you create sustainable clothing? Can clothing be sustainable? And they did research, and that kind of provoked thought and inquiry into that core question. Alongside that framing, we looked at artists, textile artists, who engage in sustainable making practices. I'll just share one with you this evening. This is Keith Lafuente, who is a textile artist who makes his own clothing out of recycled fabrics, textiles. So the children looked at a whole range of different artists in this phase. So in the next phase, we had a series of skill building workshops where children were divided into groups, and each group focused on a different aspect of garment making, be that sewing, cutting and tying, adhesion techniques, dyeing the fabrics, and the designing process, designing a garment. Megan's expertise and guidance in these workshops helped the children build skills, learn more about textiles, experiment with textile making practices, and translate their ideas into designs. So you can see here on this slide, there's just a child who's experimenting with dyeing, with cutting, with sewing, another one with gluing, adhesion, techniques to make that collar, that dog-like collar and cape. And some of their initial sketches here I've just shown you. We then entered probably my favorite phase of the design process, which is this one of making, experimenting, playing, and innovating, where children engaged in this kind of process of play and experimentation. The classrooms came to life. They were really buzzing and alive as children engaged in total creative liberty to design their own garment. So this meant that children could follow their own unique ideas and interests, choosing what to design, how to make it, and when to make it outside of these workshops. They had autonomy to explore different materials and styles. So it was really child-led in this phase of design. What came out of it and what I really witnessed was a huge joy in the classroom, but also children exploring their own identities and personalities through the process of making their own clothes. And the garments in a way became vehicles for expressing their passions, their hobbies, their interests, and even parts of their identities. The children then, once they were like nearly complete with their garments, we had a chance for feedback, and they were able to receive feedback in multiple different ways. The first way was like practical feedback, which was through testing the garments on themselves and on their peers. This allowed them to assess the fit, comfort, and durability of their garments. They observed how their garments moved, felt, and looked, and were able to make judgments themselves about the practical fit and durability of their garments. The second way was through feedback from Megan, so like formal feedback sessions, which I've got a picture of here. In these sessions, Megan prompted the children to consider what they loved about their garments, what they learnt through the process of garment making, and where they saw room for improvement. They also had peer feedback in an ongoing and informal way. The children regularly tried on each other's garments in the workshops and throughout the week, and exchanged ideas and offered their opinions to one another. They learned to give and receive feedback in this way, which enhanced their communication skills and their ability to support one another. Once we had finished the garments, we shared this project in a couple of different ways. And the first one that I'd like to share with you this evening anyway, is this photo book that we made. So each child had their picture taken in their own garments for this photo book. They also had their artistic statement in the book and their initial sketch. So I'll be sharing some of those slides with you now, but yeah, I felt that this was a successful way of showcasing the design making process, and also enabling each child to participate, because many children didn't want to be models in the fashion show. So they weren't going to be seen in their garments, but in this instance, it provided an opportunity for all children to be seen wearing a garment, their own garment. So here we have, I'm going to just talk through a few different slides which show a few of the different children, their garments and their artistic statements or views of their garments. So I made a Dr. Strange inspired cape and gemstone necklace. The garment was made by carefully sewing together a blanket using special red thread. While wearing it, you feel warmer and more confident. This is Violet. I'm wearing my own garment, which I created by sewing together different cotton and wool fabrics. This colourful dress can be worn to the beach or at home and is best worn in spring and summer. Here is Curtis. I made a goth, emo and Gen Z outfit. I call it walking up to my bestie at a funeral. I feel amazing when I wear this garment, as I love being able to change genders temporarily and the fact that it's black. Alba, I made a robe by sewing, tying and gluing together fabric. I really like the long flowy hems of my garment. This is Alexander. I'm wearing a top that I made by cutting off the legs of black jeans and sewing them onto a small blanket. The garment feels cozy, but looks like a gangster jacket. And Miller, I'm wearing gloves that I made myself by cutting holes in socks. I'm really proud of what I've made, as I've always wanted my own gloves. Sunny, I'm wearing a royal robe. It's meant to be worn by a king, queen, or prince, and if a non-royal person wears it, they get cursed. I encrusted a dressing gown with lightning bolts to create this royal robe. Chichi, I made a poncho using bits of material sewn together. The jagged pieces of material on my garment are meant to represent the hard times in life. When I wear this garment, I feel proud and strong, but also flowy and light. So that's just a little sample of the student's work. I was really moved by these reflections that the children made. I thought it was so powerful to see this combination of the initial design, the initial sketch, the finished project, the finished product, and coupled with the students' own inner world reflections on their creation, what it meant to them and what it represented for them. So this second and most prominent way that we shared the children's work was through this fashion show. So once the children had completed their own garments, we went into this phase of preparing to run a fashion show, and it was entirely child-led with adult supervision and prompting and inspiration. The children were taught about what a fashion show typically involves, and then they elected their own groups. So they created groups, they formed groups, teams, working groups to be part of, and then they worked within those groups to execute the fashion show over a number of weeks. So I've just put here a combination, some of the groups. There were others too, but I just thought I'd share. So there was like a set design group, there were dressers, there was a show caller, we had models, a communications team, there was a music director, a backstage photographer, a front of house photographer, and a couple of MCs. So in this phase, as I say, the children really kind of took this and ran with it with very little adult intervention. And And yeah, it was really a joy to see this kind of child-led learning take off. What I observed was that children were highly engaged and motivated in this phase of the design process. They had elected a team to be part of, so there was the motivation piece there for them. They were often working with their peers who they felt accountable to and inspired by and motivated by. So it really became a real buzz. There was a lot of joy in this phase. And yeah, it was really beautiful to see them working together and pulling it off, this big fashion show. So we put on the fashion show. Oh, here are some pictures. It was just in the school playground, and you can see we had like recycled school carpet for the runway and other sheets and bedding and things. And the children wearing each other's outfits. So we had the ones who just decided to be models were wearing garments made by the whole group. And they designed their own walks and the music and the way they interacted with the audience and poses and things like that. So the fashion show, one of the central pillars I mentioned was community. It brought together the community in a number of different ways. Obviously, on the night itself, there was a huge turnout, and it was a really special celebration for the community to come together and celebrate the children's work. Also to see the garments that they had donated, as all of the recycled materials came from the school community. So it was also really exciting for them to see their own clothing given a second life. But also community was forged throughout the design process as parents came in as volunteers to help the children in each phase of the fashion show. Here's the whole fashion show and the audience itself. So alongside the school community, the show also sparked a conversation with the wider community, and that's the fashion kind of world. We chose to stage the fashion show during Australian Fashion Week, with a vision to spark a connection or a conversation between the fashion industry and this next generation of designers. With the help of some of the older children, some of the year sixes, we wrote together some media press releases. And we were lucky to be picked up by the ABC, who came and covered part of the show. And the children were just so moved by that and so excited to have their project reach a wider audience, to feel significant, like they were part of a bigger conversation. And it was a really inspiring opportunity for them to have their voices heard and to feel a sense of belonging to a bigger cause than just a school project. If I haven't communicated this already, for me, the project really highlighted the power of child-led learning in creating transformative educational experiences. I witnessed the children come to life as they felt confident enough to express sides of themselves that I really hadn't seen before. They engaged joyfully in each stage of the making process, and the child-led element meant that they really connected with their peers, and not only with their peers, but also the project fostered a sense of connection and community to the wider school. So I feel that positioning the child as the leader of their learning is really powerful. They become active participants in their learning, making decisions, solving problems, and taking on their learning journey with joy and enthusiasm. That's it from me. We'll see if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Amelia. That was excellent, just like it was at the conference. There was a couple of questions that have been posed in the chat already, but if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. I thought I'd kick us off with a question around embodiment within this process, because you talked a lot about the child-led learning, and I think that is a major part of what you've achieved here with the children. But I'm just wondering whether you can share any insights you might have gleaned from the children regarding the impact of not just designing the clothes, but then wearing them and showing them off. I'm really curious about the performative aspect of this learning.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I think for me it was very interesting to see, I guess, which children took to the performance and which shied away from it, and also what the pressure of a performance, how that manifested differently for different children. So the build-up was certainly one that induced some anxiety for some children, and others not so much, and just seeing, I guess, the confidence that came from persisting with a potentially uncomfortable situation was really, really moving. I think the children came to life when performing to their peers, and also then on the final night performing to a wider audience. It's not something that I do a huge amount of, facilitating these big performances, but I can see that it was a huge confidence booster, like a euphoric experience for so many of the participants.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat about, just a quick one about what the age of the students were. I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
So it was a whole school fashion project, but the people, the as in like K to 6. So some of the younger children, K to 3, made like different garments like hats and bags, smaller things. But the key children who were part of this were 9 to 12-year-olds who did the organizing of the fashion show and the larger garment making, 9 to 12-year-olds.
There's a question here from Amanda. Amanda, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh, hi. No, I was just interested in how long this entire process was and whether any of the kids were, whether any of them lost interest. I can't imagine that they would, but I'm just wondering was there much of variety in how engaged the students were from the very start and then all the way to the end, other than obviously the anxiety you've mentioned, but in terms of sustaining their interest like the whole time.
Thank you for the question. So it ran for about a term and a half. So let's say 15 weeks-ish, weekly sessions for a couple of hours each week. And then children had the opportunity in Montessori classroom to continue with their learning throughout the week if they want to. But we had these set times of an hour or two a week for 15 weeks, say. And yeah, there was definitely like ebbs and flows in some children's enthusiasm for the project. I think the thing that really held it together and meant that kept children on board was the variety of roles. So even in just the garment making section, there were children who weren't really interested in garment making, a few who really weren't that interested, but they had their eyes already set on the designing of the flyer or the score or the script for being an MC. And I think that in those sessions, they were able to begin that, or at least let their imaginations run wild about the potential for this and that and that. So I feel like, yeah, the diversity of options and the choices kept children on board.
I wanted to ask about the way that you describe the process, Amelia, is it's really interesting, and you come at it from the child-led approach, but I can't really get over how holistic the entire process ends up being, that there's a sense in which you have been able to touch upon in a really deep way and not in superficial ways, kind of every point along the road of fashion design, which is really great. Like there's something kind of holistic and comprehensive almost about that approach. Was that an ambition from the outset? And I'm curious about how your kind of relationship to the project evolved as it went on and as time went on.
Thank you. It definitely evolved. I think I coupled with, from the outset, I mean, I had the idea, and then I coupled with kind of experts in a range of different fields and sought expert advice throughout, so that influenced the design process and the whole flow of the project. So Megan Hanson was one, but there were a number of other people who work in textile making or the fashion industry who I consulted and spoke to and learned from, and then would scaffold accordingly. Definitely. Yeah.
Nikki, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Amelia. Thanks so much for your presentation. It was amazing and just sounded so exciting. I'm fascinated to learn more about this collaboration you're having with experts and how bringing them in to support that initial information session and then also, I guess, to bring, that expertise to frame the whole thing. Is it how important was that for you, and what impact did that have on the kids, do you think, having that extra aspect of the project?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important for children, the 9 to 12 age group. In my experience, bringing in professionals is very inspiring for the children. You know, I'm with them for 3 years, day in, day out. You know, there's a limit to how kind of seriously they take me or how inspired they are. At the end, you know, it has a huge gravity having an expert. So having Megan come in, and then we had a couple of other people, one who is works in like the fashion industry and has put on a huge amount of fashion shows, so could speak to her experience putting on fashion shows. And really, she only came in for a short amount of time, but it was enough to really grab them and to make them understand the scope, I guess, of this project, like what it really represented in a world outside of the schools. I think it was and is, and I've done it a lot in the past with different across different subject areas, even via Zoom or whatever it is. But to get an expert for those 9 to 12-year-olds, so important and impactful. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Was that like an artist in residence kind of a thing, or was it just like where they just came in as a favor kind of thing, or yeah?
Just little bit different. Megan was paid, to do a few workshops. And then the others came in volunteers just for 15, 20 minutes, you know. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thanks. Amelia, I'm really interested to kind of learn or have you speak about how it's impacted your own teaching now. Like, what have you learned from it that you feel like you can carry forward into your practice?
Thank you. A couple of things. I think the bigger, the better. Like, I think aiming big and involving more people. And I think that is something that I'll take away, rather than being conservative and anxious and worried and just doing kind of, well, just do this and I know we'll be able to achieve that. Like looking really big picture is connecting with the wider world. Like, I'm continually now thinking about how I can connect the classroom with the world outside of the classroom. Like connecting with Australian Fashion Week, that was amazing. And for me, professionally, for the kids, I think, so leaving the classroom, thinking big and centering joy. Yeah.
Do you feel that your confidence to go big has been built through this project now? Because you mentioned before, you know, it's not something, I haven't done this before, I don't do this often. Yeah. Do you feel like this has really built your confidence to kind of go big and to take a bit more risk?
Yes, up 100%, definitely. I don't know where the anxiety comes from, but I guess there's a fear of failure, or you've got all the children too that you're holding through the process. I want to make it a good one for them. But yeah, definitely it has improved my sense of confidence, and I guess just understanding the amazing impact learning experiences like this have for, like years or lifetimes.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think that might be a nice place to stop, ending on experiences that have impact on lifetimes. And I'd like to thank Amelia for her contribution tonight. It's just lovely to see a project that captures the imagination of people that were there and people that weren't there. And it's just great to be able to share it with this community of practice that gets together every so often. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you haven't already, please become a member of the Create Centre. We run events like this all the time, and and many other exciting events that are coming up later this year. Thank you very much for sharing, Amelia, and I look forward to seeing you all at some webinar in the future.
Thank you.